All right, very quickly, to prepare you for the day, we want to walk you through what are going to be the key battleground states. These are the areas we want you to be tracking the numbers of in the next few minutes. We're going to be bringing you a series of numbers. This is what you need to keep an eye out for. Number one, Arizona. Down here, as you can see, Republicans hope to win back this state from Democrats. But a little bit more context here. This is where one of the big questions will be election candidate quality. When you have your candidates saying and denying and questioning the 2020 election results, can these candidates be trusted? Will voters still vote for them? The GOP, which is obviously the Republicans, have had election deniers lead their campaign down in Arizona. We're moving quickly now over all the way to the other side of the country, Georgia, as you can see, where Democrats hold the Senate seats, but there is a Republican governor. Questions over here about how the GOP's Stacey Abrams could be, how that would go. She would be the first black female governor if she were to win. Now we're moving up Michigan, where, as we've just shown you, there is big focus right now on the gubernatorial race. Gubernatorial meaning for the governor, where you have Whitmer versus Dixon up here. Remember, the results will be coming in. We'll be giving you deeper breakdowns as to why each of these races matter. Right now, though, quickly, we're going to move to Michigan, where this is particularly important. Democrats are banking on the abortion issue to boost turnout. Remember, Roe versus Wade has changed how many Americans are able to access abortion. Abortion is one of perhaps the top 3 issues on the top of the agenda, because these elections will have an immediate result on some states and their abortion access. Now we're going back over here to Nevada, as you can see, where Democratic Party incumbents that are in power right now are deeply vulnerable, and we're going to be tracking that, as we've just told you. In Nevada also, you have, as we've told you a little while earlier, the shadow of 2020 election deniers. So once again, the reappearance of that factor coming in. Remember, Trump has largely led that call, questioning the 2020 election results. And now we're going back very quickly to Pennsylvania, where you have a very, very exciting race taking place as we speak between, as we just showed you, John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. Mehmet Oz being a particularly famous TV personality. He's running for the Republicans. And on the other side, Fetterman, who is a Democrat. Now, Pennsylvania does have a big Democratic base. It is a state that put Biden over the top in 2020. Still, when you look at the numbers for the two, it's a close call. Now, as we've also told you, there's also key Senate and gubernatorial races taking place, and of course, a big GOP push. All of that taking place in Pennsylvania. Now, we're taking you over to Wisconsin. I hope you're able to keep up with us. Now, this is among the US's most closely divided states. Right here, I want to pause and tell you, when you take a look at the present numbers in the Senate and in the House, you see that there are just slight majorities for the Democrats in both places. Now, that's obviously going to change in the next few hours, but that slight majority is worth taking a note of just to see how deeply divided the country is. Now, in Wisconsin, as we just said, GOP senators and the Democratic governor face a tough re-election challenge. I'm going to go over back now to the guests that are with us right now on the show. We're going to come back to both of them and ask them more questions here. Stephen, I'd actually like to come over to you with our next question in this entire show. If I could ask you to break down for our audiences how today's possible results will have an effect on U.S. fiscal policy, because that's not something we've touched on yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, what policies?
U.S. fiscal policy in particular.
Well, one thing I just want to touch on is you're somewhat correct in discussing characterizing the U.S. as evenly divided. In many ways it is, but the even division is partly a result of the way our election system is set up. Joe Biden barely won in 2020, even though he got 7 more million votes than Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, even though she beat Donald Trump in terms of popular votes by about 2.5 million. And if you were simply to take the total votes for Senate, Democratic versus Republican candidates across the country, you'd have many, many more voters voting for Democrat candidates, but because of the way our electoral system is set up, it doesn't play out that way in terms of voting. California, for example, is very heavily weighted towards Democrats, but in terms of votes, but it only gets 2 senators, just as Wyoming, which is maybe 1/30th or 1/50th the size of California does. So I just wanted to emphasize that when we talk about evenly divided. Now, I'm sorry, again, the connection isn't that clear. When you mentioned policy, what kind of policy could you say again you were talking about?
I was asking you in specific about fiscal policy. One of the things that's been written a lot about is that the 2022 contest will have a near instant effect on U.S. fiscal policy. That's where I was asking if you could just explain to our audiences how.
Now that I finally understand it, and apologies on that, that's a great question. Because it plays out in a few ways. One is that Democrats typically want to spend more on social services and matters such as that. In fact, the child poverty rate in the U.S. during COVID dropped dramatically because Democrats put much more money into this. Republicans sometimes go for more restrained budgets, although in recent years that hasn't necessarily been the case, but they do like to cut taxes more. So both the parties tend to run big deficits, sometimes Republicans more so than Democrats because they cut taxes, especially, I'm not overstating this case, taxes for the very well off. So both parties tend to run deficits. But there's another dimension to this I want to emphasize, which is that Republican-controlled Congresses in recent years, by which I mean actually, going back to the Clinton years, so we're talking about a quarter of a century, have sometimes used the tool of threatening to totally shut down the government to not authorize the U.S. go over what's called its debt ceiling, to threaten to shut down the government, which could have massive consequences, not just for the U.S., but for the world economy, including India's. And that could very much be the case this time around as well. If the Republicans control one or both houses of Congress, they may say, unless you agree to everything we want or to much of what we want, we're just going to do a shutdown, which in effect doesn't authorize the U.S. to spend more than a certain amount of money, which has really big implications in terms of the U.S. credit rating and the world economy.
Okay, I'm going to very quickly now go over to Anang. As you can see, I'm trying to alternate between both of you. So Anang, I just want to come to you with the next question over here. I want to understand from you, Anang, and bring us, please, examples of the past to possibly answer this question. Right now, if we do see Republicans take control, if we do see them take control of the Senate and the House of Representatives in the next few hours and in the next few days, what options does that then leave for the sitting president, and how have we seen this play out in the past? We know that the Republicans will make it top of their agenda to prevent the U.S. president from getting what he'd like to get done in the next 2 years. But what does that effectively leave then in the president's arsenal?
Well, at least until January, when the new Congress will be sworn in, if the Republicans win the Senate and the House, President Biden will then, he won't be a lame duck president, but he'll definitely have sort of a lame presidency going forward. The Congress and the Senate, which are still in Democrats' hands, will most likely try to ram through a few more spending bills, possibly some of the agendas that they're concerned about. So a climate bill might be possible. But Senator Manchin from West Virginia and Senator Sinema from Arizona might stymie that all over again. If they see a chance to work with the Republicans in the future, they might not, end up having that majority or that solid vote in the Senate that they need. But for most likely, what President Biden will do in the near future is try to work with the Democrats to make sure to get through some of his agenda now before the new Congress comes in. And then later on, most likely what he'll try to do is use executive orders, which the president can do, which he's already done with student loan forgiveness and things like that, to get his agenda forward. But that will again, be fought in the House and the Senate if the GOP controls it. And most likely, down the line, there'll be massive fights. I don't think there'll be a government shutdown. I think Republicans have done that at least twice at this point, and they know it's a failing proposition to shut down the government. So most likely that's the only part in the next 2 years, if the Republicans win both the House and the Senate, that they will compromise